Hello, Luminary. I hope you are finding yourself pretty grounded this week. I know we have a huge shakeup with our Saturn retrograde at the beginning of the week. And then, of course, you are receiving this on the day of our full moon eclipse in Sagittarius. And as we head into Mercury retrograde, I want to show you how all of these cycles are so intertwined and how you can use them to your benefit in your life and business. Welcome to the Savvy Luminary podcast, Astrology for Entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Leslie Tagorda, creator of the Astrobrand Method, business astrologer, brand designer, author, and Aquarius boss woman. I help visionary spiritual entrepreneurs and impact makers like you illuminate and amplify your unique star powers so you can be the luminary you were born to be. So what's come up for you that you have to just let go and release and just disassemble with this full moon eclipse in Sagittarius? This full moon eclipse in Sagittarius is really having us let go of all of those outdated beliefs so that we can replace them with our new truths. The definition of one of the definitions that I found online for truth is a fact or a belief that is accepted as true. Kind of some circular logic there, right? But when we look at the axes of knowledge, the axes of information that is represented in our natal chart between the opposition between Gemini and Sagittarius, and of course, because it is that full moon that I was talking about earlier, the full moon eclipse, where we're just like letting go and like disseminating all of these old beliefs, these old facts, what is true, what is no longer true. All of this is such necessary information so that we can really look at, hey, are we still believing in things that we thought were true? Or are we basing our lives on what society told us was true, but is not really true? Eclipses at the same degree and the same sign happen in patterns of 19 years. So they can really show us our evolution of those life lessons that we're meant to re-examine cycle after cycle. If you haven't already noticed in your life and your business, the same old devils come up. And it's these little devils that is our soul's mission to understand and to elevate and gain perspective if we've been doing our work, right? There's a few of us that haven't been doing the work, and instead of going up in the spiral, we go down in the spiral. But I know I know you're not one of those. You might know people who are those, but you are not one of those. And so if you look back to 19 years ago when we had this same Sagittarius full moon eclipse with the Gemini sun, truths, beliefs, all of those things that you worked on 19 years ago, you are getting to look at again from a higher perspective. If you've been following me on social media, you might see a post that I was questioning, are your beliefs based on facts? Are your facts that you have still true for you? Are there beliefs that you once held as truth no longer true? And what you can notice when these when you're trying to figure out, is this true, is this not true, is this fact, is this not fact, because sometimes we can take things as fact. For example, you might have the inner dialogue like, I don't have enough money, I never have enough money. Well, is this a fact? How much money is in your bank account? Do you have enough money to buy clothes? Do you have enough money to buy shelter? Do you have enough money to buy food? And if indeed you have all of those things covered for the here and now, that story that you tell yourself, I don't have enough money, is in fact not true. And so when we are trying to figure things out, whether things are fact or true, is it true to us? Is it true to someone else? Is it true to society? We're constantly trying to go through all of those different aspects, and there is not an easy answer. But what I've noticed is when I start to make statements like, I have to work hard, I have to be the best, I have to do this, I have to do that, it is likely that any phrase that starts with, I have to, is in fact not true. these could be socially or familial or other people having expectations on us that we have adopted as our truth. And this is hopefully what you are examining, have examined, and have decided to let go of this full moon eclipse. And the reason why this full moon eclipse is so important is that this Mercury retrograde in Gemini is highly integrated, because Mercury retrograde in Gemini is connecting our two eclipses, our eclipses in our first full moon eclipse in Sagittarius and our new moon solar eclipse in Gemini in just a few weeks. So today I really wanted to focus our conversation on the importance of this Mercury retrograde in Gemini, where we all get the energy to rethink our mind, our facts, and get to our truth. I know that Mercury retrogrades can cause a lot of anxiety. So I hope that throughout this episode, I plant the seeds of spaciousness in you. I want you to feel spacious, not anxious. I want you to know that these Mercury retrograde cycles that happen 3 times a year, I want you to know that these Mercury retrograde cycles are part of our larger solar cycle, where we get to reset our truth to our solar consciousness. Solar, our soul, our sun. That earlier in the week, when Saturn came to a stop in order to go retrograde, that we were tearing down those old structures and obligations that no longer serve us, that today's full moon eclipse allows us to have massive breakthroughs in being able to finally release belief systems keeping you small. And then our upcoming Mercury retrograde, that we're already in the cycle, that is really going to help you reconnect and rethink your new truth so that you can get to your core message and belief. What I want you to do as you listen to this episode is that I want you to learn to be generous with yourself. This is a time where you get to make time to rethink. You get to make space to reflect, and you get to reserve your energy to rewind. I'll be sharing a lot of information. So I created a free Mercury retrograde worksheet with a bunch of journaling questions and all the details that I talked about in today's episode. You can head over to thesavvyluminary.com/Mercury to get your Mercury retrograde worksheet. And if you feel so inclined, like you know that this is a big retrograde cycle for you and you would like some personalized insight, you can sign up for a mini Mercury retrograde Astrobrand insight reading, where I'll deliver a short Loom video to you. Because this is such a meaningful cosmic cycle and shift that we're going through, with 3 big shifts colliding, we must set an intention and mantra for this episode. So if you could plant your feet firmly in the ground, if you have the ability to take a pause, I want you to sit up with your back straight and your crown reaching the sky. And I'd like you to take a deep breath and then repeat this mantra after me. I now know my truth. I'd like for you to take another deep breath to breathe in your truth. And repeat again after me. I now know my truth. So what I want to do today in sharing all of this information about Mercury retrograde, my intention is not to overwhelm you. I want to share with you what this Mercury retrograde cycle is all about, what it is, why it's important, what you need to watch out for, and how to use it in your business, including how to personalize it. So looking at your natal chart to see how it may affect you. So Mercury retrograde doesn't officially start until Saturday, May 29th, but we are almost already feeling it, because Mercury is coming to a slowdown, really stepping on the brakes before it goes into stop, before it hits reverse. So that's why we're covering all of this information now. This Mercury retrograde in Gemini is a little bit out of the ordinary for all of our normal Mercury retrograde cycles. The theme for this Mercury retrograde in Gemini, with all of the other aspects that I was talking about earlier, Saturn retrograde and the eclipse season, is that we get to rethink our mind, facts, and truth. Again, I'm granting you permission to feel spacious, not anxious during this cycle. I'm granting you permission to change your mind, permission to question your truths, and permission to take your time, all the time you need to gain clarity. When you trust yourself and when you give yourself permission in this way, you do not need to hustle. The worst thing that you can do during a Mercury retrograde is hustle and rush. Let's say no to that. So Mercury retrograde seasons are meant to be these inquisitive and reflective times to reset our mindset. I think that it's wonderful that we get these resets 3 times a year. While I know there's a lot of fear mongering about what to do and don't do, if you know how to work with this energy instead of against it, you can uncover deep new truths that fit your current reality. We feel Mercury retrogrades on an intimate, personal level because as a personal planet, it is extra close to the earth, and then when it's in its retrograde cycle, it is at its closest approach to earth. And as the messenger to our sun's solar consciousness, Mercury is constantly on the run, relaying information back and forth, in and out from us. So when Mercury steps on the brakes, we do feel this. So the question that we get to answer over the next few weeks is, what communications and mindset do you get to rethink that add to your truth? Because it is from this truth that you can share your big message with clarity and understanding so that you can serve the people that you are meant to serve. So you can make change in the world, the change that is really aligned for you, the change that the world is really depending on you to come through with. And so this Mercury retrograde going through its home sign of Gemini shows us where we've outgrown our truths and where we need to redefine our understanding so that we can express ourselves in alignment to our current reality. Now, understanding is a two-way street. Understanding is part one is understanding ourselves, where we're coming from, and being able to express that clearly. Part two is then being able to understand others. So this understanding is much more meta than just like, why can't you hear me? Why won't you listen? It's like, well, are we listening? Are we doing our part to understand? And this retrograde happens in several cycles. And for this first half of our cycle, now through June 10th, you'll be discovering what you need to unlearn. It's not crucial to take action during this first step. In fact, you'll have a better go of understanding if you give things the space to present clarity on their own terms. A reminder, you cannot rush this. Be prepared for things to take longer than expected and the need to re-explain or reread. Permission to misunderstand and not be clear. You get the opportunity to rethink your truths and your core messaging in your business. So Mercury's ruler, Gemini, is very quick thinking. Mercury represents our thinking, our communications, our logic, our understanding, the way that we express ourselves, the technology that we use to communicate, the technology that we use to have transactions on commerce. It's everybody that is close to us in short distance travel, thinking your quick commute to work or a walk in your neighborhood. Mercury represents our ability to share information and teach information, and it is also the messenger. Mercury in astrology doesn't necessarily have its own agenda. It is simply the messenger to our sun, and our sun is our solar energy, our creative force, and so Mercury is merely the messenger. Then the zodiac Gemini ruled by Mercury, you'll hear some similar themes now. Gemini is an air sign, so very intellectual, very social, loves sharing information and ideas, loves gathering facts. It needs variety because it's so mutable. It loves to change and shapeshift. It's very quick, so think of like quick air, very windy with that air sign, and it's definitely witty. It loves chatting and engaging in dialogue. And at its highest level, it would love to be curious and listen. And at that shadow level, it can sometimes feel like it's always changing its mind. But I'd like to challenge that idea that Gemini is always changing its mind. It's just that it can hold so many different perspectives. Just like Mercury, Gemini represents our neighborhoods, our closest communities, and even our siblings. It rules over technology and sharing information like teaching. It's very changeable, and its highest level, it is so understanding, and all it desires is really to be heard and understood itself. Then when we have this Mercury plus Gemini and now in retrograde motion going backwards, this is a chance where our quick wit is sometimes a little bit now stunted, a little bit convoluted, a little bit confusing. And so this is why they say Mercury retrogrades, you should always double check things and like expect miscommunications, because our mind isn't working in this kind of normal process. Now, if you were born during a Mercury retrograde, you're like, well, this feels lovely. Well, yes, it feels lovely because you're feeling like you're returning to home. Your thought processes go against what normal thought processes, whatever normal means, but what societal normal says that it means. And so when Mercury goes retrograde, instead of working against it and kind of suffering in the confusion and suffering in the miscommunications and the slowdowns, let's take advantage of this time to re-examine our truths, to make space to redefine our beliefs, to reflect on our big message. Like, who has time to reflect nowadays? And to rewrite some of your core messaging and to reconnect with neighbors, especially if we're coming out of COVID and things are freeing up for you, getting reconnect with those people that you haven't maybe seen for an entire year. And so that's why Mercury in Gemini is so important. Now, I've done a lot of other episodes on the different Mercury retrogrades, so you can check them out. I'll have them in the show notes at thesavvyluminary.com. As a recap, basically, Mercury retrograde is a dance between Mercury and the Sun. From our perspective on Earth, Mercury appears to be going backwards. It's not going backwards, and it happens 3 times a year. The reason why is because Mercury zips around the Sun so much more quickly than us. On the Earth, we take 365 days to go around the Sun. Mercury only takes 88 days. So every time Mercury zips around and it laps us, there's a point in the transit where it appears like it's going backwards from our perspective on Earth. During a Mercury retrograde, again, Mercury is at the closest point to Earth than it is in any part of its orbit. And Mercury is never more than 1 sign away from the Sun, so never more than 28 degrees away from the Sun. It spends 19% of its orbit in retrograde. So that's why we get these about 3 weeks each time, 3 times a year to redo. Now, this Mercury retrograde in Gemini is a little bit different than the rest. And so let's take a look at these fascinating facts. So this Mercury retrograde in Gemini is actually longer in duration than most other Mercury retrograde cycles. We get to have this Mercury retrograde cycle for 25 days. Our Mercury retrograde back in February was only 22 days. So we get more time to reflect and rethink our new truths. Isn't that exciting? For some of us, yay. And this Mercury retrograde actually, even though it's longer, it covers a shorter area in the ecliptic. It's only retracing 8 degrees back through Gemini. In February, the Aquarius retrograde backtracked 15 degrees. So we're only covering half as many degrees as back in February, and it's taking us longer. So we get to not only have more time to reflect, but now we get to even go deeper into this area of our lives and businesses that we need to rethink. Now, the midway point, called the combust of Mercury retrograde, it's kind of like the full moon of a Mercury and Sun kind of phase, except from our perspective here on Earth, it looks like they are conjunct. This happens on the exact same day and same degree as our new moon solar eclipse in Gemini. This will be happening at Gemini of 19 degrees. So I want you to look at your chart at Gemini of 19 degrees and see that hot spot, because that is the culmination of everything that we need to rethink and relearn in our businesses and our lives. So if you have a chance on that day of the new moon solar eclipse in Gemini, that is Thursday, June 10th, I highly suggest clearing that day of any obligations. So you have lots of time to plant your seeds, to get really clear, and or maybe not even get clear, because I feel like it's going to be an information overload day. So whatever you can do to clear your mind will be a really good way to spend that day. And the astrology of this Mercury retrograde in Gemini is that Mercury isn't making that many aspects to other planets during this transit. So really, we're getting this pure rethinking, pure Mercury in Gemini, because Mercury is only making a few aspects to the moon and a few aspects to Neptune. So meaning aspects to our emotional and intuitive self, and aspects to our spirituality and connection to all. So this is going to let us get really clear and focus on our ideas on how we feel about them and how we are connected to them. So why are Mercury retrogrades so important? Well, this is really, again, what I was mentioning earlier, our time to reflect. It's our energy to receive and express information and to reset this 3 times a year. Can you imagine if, thinking about your laptop, your workhorse laptop that you're doing all your work on, and those times that you forget to shut them off, or even like your phone, you forget to power it down every once in a while, and it starts to do like really crazy kooky things. And then you're like, oh, I better shut that down or restart it. And you shut everything off, you power it off for 30 seconds. It clears its cache, it clears its memory, it makes more space and to enable to do more with its memory. You turn it back on, and all of a sudden it's working like new again. You're like, phew. Well, that's what these Mercury retrogrades are like for our brains. Because honestly, we are inundated with information nowadays. So now we get to give ourselves permission to slow down, disconnect, recalibrate, and redo the things that need our attention. So, of course, this is the perfect time to redo, reorganize, reflect, rewrite, rethink, anything that starts with a re. Such a lovely way for the universe to give us the energy to make sure we are on the right path. And if we're not on the right path, all we have to do is shift and pivot. In other episodes, I've covered what happens when you don't work with Mercury retrograde with that energy. But I'm sure you have already noticed when you haven't been working with the Mercury retrogrades at some point in your career. Like you're rushing to get through things and all of a sudden there's a traffic jam, or you're trying to get all of these things done and then some kind of delay happens. Or I think it was a couple of years ago when I was on a family vacation in Hawaii, and our hotel had this electrical break and there was this water leak and the fire alarm went off and the whole building flooded and none of the elevators were working, and we were on the 19th floor. And oh my gosh, it was such a disaster. But instead of getting frustrated, I laughed because we were going through a Mercury retrograde in water a couple of years ago. So it was really interesting to see that. I know from my clients who have really fast acting Mercuries that are in the fastest part of their cycles, Mercury retrogrades are really hard for them because they're always so quick witted, and that like messages and words come to them really quickly. And so Mercury retrogrades can be really hard for you if your Mercury is especially quick. But if you have your natal Mercury that is retrograde or in its signs like Pisces or Sagittarius, you tend to be a more abstract and deep thinker. before. And so these Mercury retrogrades feel really spacious because you're really in your element at this time. Regardless if your Mercury is a fast mover or a slow mover or a stopped mover, whatever it is for you, these are the things that we can watch out for in our business during Mercury retrograde in Gemini. So, number one, I want you to be able to keep your data safe. So if you have a hard drive that is not backed up to cloud, make sure you have all of that backed up. If you have things on cloud, make sure that you're paying for your cloud and your subscription doesn't run out. Changing out your passwords, but keeping them in secure places. All of those things to keep your data safe. Shred your papers, all of those things, because the worst thing that can happen during Mercury retrograde is having identity theft. The second thing you want to watch out for during Mercury retrograde is forcing to get things done. If you feel yourself pushing and pushing and pushing, take a break. Stop pushing. You should never be forcing in your business, and especially during a Mercury retrograde. If you're forcing, you're doing something wrong. There is a slight difference between forcing and really trying to get things like clear and working hard for the right reasons. So just really notice and make sure you're not going overboard. Next, you really don't want to be rushing things. This is not a time to pack your calendars or try to accomplish too much, because you want the space to be able to edit and make time for any mistakes or miscommunications that can happen. I also want you to look out for information overload. We live in so much information from social media, from all your email subscriptions to all the multitude of television subscriptions, all of the information. So pick and choose your information wisely. Similarly, be on the lookout for fake news and misleading facts. Where are your news sources coming from? Where are your facts coming from? Be on the lookout, because already we are really ripe for confusion and misunderstanding and miscommunications and delays. So just be on the lookout for those things. And if at all possible, do not start anything new. This is a good time to redo things, but not start new things. However, if you are starting something that has to do with reflection or retreating or redoing, then that is harnessing the energy of the Mercury retrograde. So permission to get started on new things as long as you're using the Mercury retrograde energy to your best intentions. Okay, so what can you do? So this is really actually a ripe and opportune time to get a lot of things accomplished in your business if you know how to use this energy of Mercury retrograde in Gemini. So here are 5 things that I would love for you to add to your to-do list. Number 1, review your existing content and make a plan to revise or reorganize. So what I mean by this is go inventory your content, all of your blog posts, all your social media posts, if you write articles on other platforms, and prioritize what you want to keep and what you want to let go. This content could also be like freebies or ebooks or workshops or courses, any content that you've created. Once you prioritize your content, review it all, and see what you want to keep, and see if there's opportunities to improve your current message on those pieces of content. What needs to be revised and optimized? Number 2, redefine your teaching methodologies to serve your customers better. So for this one, I want you to dig into the whys and the truths of what you teach and how you teach. Look at your courses and your workshops, any informational posts, anything where you can deepen the connection and experience of your students. This is one of the things that I'm focusing on during this Mercury retrograde. I'm working with the marvelous Mariana Pena. She's helping me deepen my framework and connect the dots about the whys and the true transformation that my students will get as I teach them the Astrobrand method. This has been so helpful. When we were meeting the other day, I was mentioning to her that I knew that the process that she was taking me on was going to be healing. Number 3, rewrite your highly trafficked posts or pages on your website. So if you already don't have Google Analytics installed on your website, I suggest that you do, and then you'll need to wait 30 days to get any kind of good metrics. But if you already have Google Analytics on your sites, go look at it and see your highly visited posts and pages. You can even check your metrics like on LinkedIn or medium.com or other sites that you might write on and see the pages that you might want to revise or fine tune. The reason why I mentioned the highly trafficked posts or pages is because these pages are already getting a lot of traffic. So why not optimize these pages to maximize them by maybe adding links to your freebies and opt-ins, or links on how to work with you, or links on how to purchase your products. It's a really low hanging fruit to optimize your highly trafficked posts and pages. Also, you can look at the subjects of these posts or pages. Maybe you want to update them, and that refresh when you resave and republish gets noted to Google, and Google says, "Oh, look at this page. It's fresh. It's being revised. It's not this old content. So I'm going to feed it even more." And then you also might see some patterns in the subjects that you've written about that are bringing you traffic. How can you create more content around those topics to bring even more traffic to your site and your content? Number 4, edit existing writing and communications projects. This is a great time to do a second or third draft of your writing projects, like books, articles, guides, opt-ins, or even website content. The extra care you put in now will go a long way. This number 4 is also on our high list right now because Jeff and I are rewriting the content for our website. And so I'm really looking forward to taking this time during the retrograde cycle to make space to do that. Our website content really does need a refresh because the message does not convey all that we do now. And number 5, reconnect with your closest neighborhood and communities. This includes siblings too. Whether your groups on social media or your next door neighbors, the people you consider close to you in proximity would love to hear what's been on your mind or what you're working on. And that proximity, I'm using this kind of in an online world too. Social media is like your online neighborhood. So they are close in proximity. So during Mercury retrograde, make this connection, this reconnection, a daily ritual during the cycle and see what comes up, especially for those with relaxed COVID restrictions who you're able to go out and visit people. Can you just imagine what it feels like to hug a friend you haven't hugged in over a year? I feel so lucky that this past weekend I got together with some of our neighborhood friends. We had an indoor gathering of, I think, 12 people, and we all hugged. And oh my gosh, it was just the best feeling in the world. So now that you have a good idea of all of the things that you're meant to do and watch out for during this Mercury retrograde, let's talk about some of the details about the schedule and things that you want to ask yourself. So I have this schedule and the journaling questions in my free Mercury retrograde worksheet that you can get at thesavvyluminary.com/Mercury. So don't worry about writing these things down. So Mercury will be highlighting the area of your chart that contains Gemini of 16 degrees to 24 degrees. It is this little finite small portion in our chart that Mercury is going back over 3 times. Back on May 14th, this is when Mercury entered the shadow zone at Gemini of 16 degrees. And so if you think back a couple of weeks, notice what communications and mindset issues are you freshly aware of? Like what's starting to come down? What truths that you had are starting to break down? You're like, oh no, I have to redo this again. What information overload are you experiencing? I know personally for me, I've been really faced with this a lot. I haven't been able to go on social media much because it's felt all so heavy. Even though I'm creating content, I know that there's something deeper that I'm supposed to come forth. And so that was me really knowing and trusting that I had to work with a professional like Mariana Pena. Then on May 29th, Mercury stations retrograde at Gemini of 24 degrees. So this is when our Mercury retrograde officially begins on May 29th. And it's that day, as Mercury is coming to a complete stop, and maybe a little bit the day before, what thoughts and truths are not yet clear? What communications and mindsets are totally breaking down? And what misinformation is now coming to you? And so you're most likely not going to be able to answer any of those questions that day. All you have to do is notice. The midway point of our Mercury retrograde cycle happens on the day of our new moon eclipse on June 10th, where Mercury and the sun meet at Gemini of 19 degrees. What is now fully illuminated for you? What is now so clear that you know that you're overthinking and overwhelmed with? What do you now see that needs to be reorganized in your mindset, in your communications? Again, nothing needs to be done right now. Just be thankful that you have now seen it in its full illumination. From June 10th through June 22nd is the second stage of our Mercury retrograde. Before this, things were really, really falling apart, and you could see all the things that needed to be detached and recreated. But now in the second phase, you're getting the facts of what needs to be put back together. So as you build up to June 22nd, when Mercury will switch gears and go forward again, what do you now have clarity on, and what will you take action on that you need to reorganize? Again, this is a process. So Mercury will still be going forward pretty slowly at first, and it will leave its shadow zone. So the shadow zone is the area where it started to go backwards at on July 7th, where Mercury will finally cross that threshold of Gemini of 24 degrees. And now this is when you can really start taking action. Things will feel like they're returning to flow after that long extended Mercury retrograde cycle. So what are now your new truths and beliefs that you are acting on? What can you now communicate and teach from these new truths in your business? That is our light at the end of the tunnel. Can you feel it? Okay, so let's get to some personalization of your Gemini Mercury retrograde. How is this going to affect you? So dig out your natal chart, and again, look for the area in your chart that contains Gemini of 16 degrees to Gemini of 24 degrees. This is the area in your chart that Mercury is retracing 3 times. So the house that contains this area of Gemini 16 to 24 degrees tells you which area of your business and your life that needs rethinking. Now, you may have 2 houses that are being highlighted. And if you have 2 houses that are being highlighted, I want you to focus on the house that has the cusp line that is activated. It's that doorway to that area of your business that is being emphasized. So, for example, if your Gemini 16 to 24 degrees goes between your 12th house and your first house, I want you to emphasize that first house, because it's that rising sign, that first house cusp, that is really being activated during this Gemini retrograde. So I want you to notice, if you have 2 houses, take the second house and put your emphasis there. I also want you to look at your natal planets that are in between Gemini of 16 degrees and 24 degrees. If you have natal planets, as Mercury is crossing over, Mercury is saying, hey, let's rethink your emotions if it's touching your moon sign. Let's rethink your actions if it's touching your Mars. If it's touching your sun, let's rethink your creation, right? Your creative vibrancy. And so any energy that it touches, if you have any natal energies in Gemini, you get to rethink those energies. Now, if you have natal planets that are in the other mutable signs like Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces between 16 and 24 degrees, these energies will also want to add their creative tension to your rethinking. These will feel a little bit more urgent. For example, if you have Mars in Pisces at 16 degrees, and so that's your energy to activate over spirituality, and then Mercury is squaring it, you're going to start to really re-question, like, hold on, am I prioritizing my spirituality in a way that is honoring who I really am, or am I just getting frustrated by this? That's just one example of how a mutable planet might act during this Mercury retrograde for you. Now, if you have air signs, if you have natal planets in air signs like Aquarius and Libra between 16 and 24 degrees, these energies are going to feel supportive in rethinking. So, for example, if you have your sun in Aquarius at this time, your creative flow and your creative vibrancy will feel really harmonized. It's going to be like, ooh, I have this new idea and how I get to harness my innovation. That's what an air sign activation during this Mercury retrograde will feel like. Okay, we're almost towards the end. I know I'm dropping a whole ton of information on you, so I hope that this is valuable for you. So let's look at the Mercury retrograde in Gemini house reflections. So which house is being highlighted by Gemini of 16 degrees to 24 degrees? I'm going to go through it by houses. This house is part of your business that needs a fresh perspective, where you give yourself permission to change your. If you have a first house activation, you are a Gemini rising and you have permission to change your mind. Rethink your role as a curious leader. What is your big message that you are really meant to share? If you are a Taurus rising or you have a second house activation, you have the permission to change your values. This time you get to reevaluate your intellectual values. You are not here to change anyone's mind, but to understand how you are adding value. If you're an Aries rising or have a third house activation, this will be you having permission to change your mind. Refine and communicate your big message to teach others through your business as a truth teller. If you're a Pisces rising or you have your Gemini Mercury retrograde activating your fourth house, you have the permission to change your heart. This is where you get to recreate your safety and security by gaining understanding on what you need and sharing your needs with your closest community. If you're an Aquarius rising, or you also have your fifth house being activated by this Gemini Mercury retrograde, you have the permission to change your passion. Reignite inquisitive, creative passion projects in your business that spark play in your inner child. If you're a Capricorn rising or have your sixth house being activated, you have permission to change your service. Reorganize your teaching and learning as acts of service through your business, where listening is as important as speaking. If you are a Sagittarius rising or otherwise have your seventh house being activated, you have the permission to change your relationships. Rethink your collaborative partnerships in your business with other curious creatives to create a shared message of understanding. If you're Scorpio rising or you otherwise have your eighth house being activated, you have permission to change your healing. Reflect on healing your voice to be heard as a necessary part of your truth in and through your business. If you have a Libra rising or otherwise have your ninth house being activated, you have permission to change your aspirations and dreams. Reimagine sharing your big vision of a diverse and equitable future built on understanding and inquiry. If you are a Virgo rising or otherwise have your 10th house being activated, you have permission to change your goals. Recommit to delivering your breakthrough message as a platform to build equitable success through listening and empathy. If you're a Leo rising or otherwise have your 11th house being activated, you have the permission to change your impact. Reactivate your greater social networks of truth tellers through humanitarian education efforts and activism. And if you are a Cancer rising, you have permission to change your wisdom. Reveal what reformations of inner soul level truth are needed to restore ease and understanding in your business. Again, that's if you have Cancer rising or you have your 12th house being activated during this Mercury retrograde. So that was an information packed. And here I'm saying, don't go with information overload. So take what you need, feel permission to leave the rest. permission to tap into your intuition, to understand your new truths. Again, I invite you to download my free Mercury Retrograde worksheet. You can access that at thesavvyluminary.com/Mercury. And if you feel called and want some insight as to what this Mercury Retrograde means for you and your truth, consider getting for yourself an Astrobrand mini reading where I'll focus your insight on your new moon activation. Before we close out today's episode, I want to make sure you have your mantra fully planted, fully embodied. Our mantra for today and for this retrograde cycle is, I now know my truth. Anytime you're feeling confusion, anytime you feel like you don't know, I now know my truth. So if you could take a nice clearing breath, let go of all of that doubt, that uncertainty, that confusion, and take a deep inhale. I now know my truth. All right, Luminary, I wish you the best over these next few weeks. Be sure to connect with me on social media and wherever you want to follow me on the Savvy Luminary Facebook group. I'll be talking all about this upcoming Mercury retrograde for a few weeks to come. Happy to support you there. Until soon. The greatest thing that you could do to me to pass things forward is to head over to Apple iTunes and leave a rating and review for this podcast. Let others know what you think, and each rating and review helps this podcast be more visible to listeners like you.